All right, guys, we're back again. This is part two. If you guys haven't watched part one, watch part one. That way you know where I left off and where we start up with this video. As you can see, we have the wall built, painted up. It's all dry, ready to go. So we're ready to start mounting up the new Navien. As you can see here, got a couple parts from Supply House. Got the expansion tank there. We've used drop cloths all through the carpet in the basement. There's another box there we got to bring in from Supply House, and this is the Navien. This is how the NFC combi units come, with a crate on the bottom, real easy to pick up. They're not too heavy, a lot lighter obviously than a cast iron boiler. So here we go. So once I unpack everything, we start lining up where I'm going to install the Navien. Usually I center it on the plywood wall, because we need enough room on the left side and the right side for their feed and returns. I always like separating everything on each side. That way it's easier for the homeowner to pinpoint where the isolation valves are, and everything is marked once I'm done. So as you can see here, I hang up the unit. I screwed it all in to the plywood and anchor it in real good, make sure it doesn't go anywhere. And we're gonna start piping up everything. So guys, if you guys use a Navien, make sure you guys use the Manifold, because it's a lot easier, looks a lot cleaner, and at least you know your secondary and your primary loop are going to be correct. If you don't want to use the Manifold, make sure you do a close space tease, the correct distance, and the proper way. That way the unit works correctly. So I always use the Manifold. It looks a lot cleaner, saves a couple joints also. Since I do solder everything, like you guys know, I don't like Pro Press. So here we go. This is the Manifold. It's a nice stainless piece with brass fittings on it. Comes with the isolation valves for the heat inside. That way you can service it if you need to flush it out or do anything like that to it. Bleed it out also. So I always recommend use the Manifold for any Navien combi unit, or even NHPs, which are boilers only. So once we got the Manifold on there, we start piping the feed side. I solder everything, so you will see a couple soldering, and then also I did cut out every time I solder pieces off video. Like this one, I used the male onto the Manifold and then soldered onto the spiral vent. Then from there we start piping everything up. This is the feed side. So on a NFC unit, the left side is feed and the right side is the return. So once I start with the feed side, I know how many zones I have. If you guys watched the first video, we know we have 5 zones. So I always use circulators, so I'm going to use 5 circulators. A lot of guys use 1 circulator and zone valves because it's a cheaper route. I don't like doing that. I like controlling every zone independently, and that way I can control the flow on each zone also. So I use Grumfist pumps, and I could determine the flow of each zone individually with the pump. If you use one pump, you got to make sure you have a strong enough pump. If all the zones call, that's going to pump all of them, pump the correct amount of water through all the zones, and then also modulate down if only one zone's calling. So this is the case. I like I said, pumps on each zone, so it works a lot better. And in this case, if one pump fails, all the other zones will still work. The other way, if the pump fails, you're kind of screwed and you have no heat nowhere. So anyhow, as you can see here, I pull out the torch. I know the Pro Press lovers are going to be like, oh, you should have done Pro Press. You would have finished a lot quicker and you would have saved money on time. To be honest with you guys, I don't care. I solder, and that's built into my price anyway. And I feel like it looks better when you solder everything. It looks more professional. And also when you press, thing is you got to worry about when you press it, it goes crooked and it looks like shit. So anyhow, I solder everything up. As you can see here, I line up all the isolation valves for the pumps first. And we solder everything individually, make sure everything's square and level. Because if you leave something crooked and you go check it down the road, it's just going to make everything crooked from there. So take your time, make sure everything's nice and level, everything's all equal. Yes, I'm still old school. I still use a level. A lot of guys start using laser levels for everything. I don't have one of those. I think I'm gonna get one to try it out, see how it works, see if it saves me time. I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't think it's gonna save me any time. Maybe for the hangers on this kind of job, but again, I do step by step, so the level works for me perfectly. What I do saves me time a lot is the Milwaukee threaded rod cutter. I use a lot of threaded rod on all my jobs. So in this video, you're not gonna see that, but I think in the future videos you'll see me using that cutter, and I'll also show you guys. It works phenomenal. If you guys have used it, you guys know it's a big difference from using Sawzall to a threaded rod cutter from Milwaukee. So anyhow, as you can see here, I line up all the circulators, Grumfis. I don't like Tacos. I had problems with them. So look at that, beautiful. Old school level, still nice and plumb, no laser. So we got the finish on the feet side, all the pumps there. So we move on to finishing the intake and the exhaust. On this case, this unit you could vent with 2-inch, but they had from the old existing unit there was 3-inch PVC going outside already for the intake and the exhaust. So what we did is we cut back about 5 feet of the exhaust, change it out to a schedule 80, which is that gray pipe you see there. That's the exhaust. So if you want this unit to work in high heat, high temperature, you need to change the exhaust to at least, I believe the manufacturer spec says 3 feet. I always go a little further if it's an existing exhaust pipe that I'm using. So I go about 4 or 5 feet. Usually I run 2-inch Poly Pro straight outside like Centrotherm. But in this case I had to reuse a section because I wasn't going to take out all that existing piping. It was probably like 30 feet down vented. So we used it. We just changed it out to CPVC. And intake, obviously, you could do with regular PVC. And we left it all 3-inch so it could look uniform. I could have reduced it down to 2-inch. But again, if you're going to reduce it down to 2-inch, make sure you reduce it down like you see here on the vertical. Do not reduce it on the horizontal, because on the intake you have no issue. But on the exhaust, if you reduce it from 3 to 2 and you leave it on the horizontal, it will collect condensation and you will have issues. So make sure you always reduce it on the vertical. So once we got that all set and done, we jump to the return to start piping that up. So on the return side, I always use the purge valve so I could purge out. So I only have to run the hose one time. I don't have to switch from zone to zone. A lot of guys use, if you have 5 zones, so use 5 bullet drains. I don't like doing that. I like one purge, and I could do everything from that purge. So I place it right after the manifold, and then I put the magnetic filter right on top of that. That way, when I'm cleaning up the system, bleeding out the system, it passes through the magnetic filter, catches everything there before I release it out. That way I know how much is in the system and I know I collected some. You could do it before, but there's no big difference. I always like doing it after anyway. That way I know what's going on with the system and I can see it. Again, you can look through the holes, but why bother? I just rather see the magnetic filter do its job. So I put that isolation valve and I start mocking that up. Again, I'm solder everything, so that's all you're gonna see here. You're not gonna see no pro press. It's all old school way I work. So torch it is. So I start doing threaded rod again. I like doing a lot of split rings and ceiling plates or floor plates, however you guys want to call them. And I level everything with torpedoes, regular 2-foot levels, no laser levels here. And once I start strapping everything up, then I start lining everything up. Now you're gonna see me putting in a reducer. I always run, when it's more than 3 zones, I always keep an 1.5 inches. But some reason, all the magnetic filters that I like using are 1 inch. So I have done tests and I reduced from 1.5 inches to 1 inch for the magnetic filter. I also called the manufacturer on the magnetic filter, and it does not reduce that much of flow that it impacts the system by going from 1.5 inches to 1 inch. So it's just a real quick reducing. It's not that much of reducing you're doing. It's not going through a whole bunch of pipe. It's just reducing a little short distance for the magnetic filter, and actually helps the filter do its job also. Stay tuned to episode 3 coming up tomorrow. If you live in North Jersey, need some plumber work done, let us know. We'll see you on the next one. See ya.